but something very strange is going on over the skies of North America. Now, 1 week ago, the American Air Force shot down a giant Chinese balloon that had crossed the continent from coast to coast. A spy balloon said the US, a weather one said China. Since then, the US has shot down 3 more objects, saying, well, they're not exactly balloons, or they may not be, but they are the size of a car. Pilots who shot them down said the latest one seemed to interfere with their electronics, and the White House press spokesman seemed flustered to be asked about one of those objects, which was actually shot down over Canada.
Why is the American military shooting something out of the sky over Canada?
Because it's part of NORAD. There is the NORAD is part of like it's a what you call a coalition, a consortium,
a pact of nations.
A pact,
okay.
Exactly. And so that's why we were able to do that. Again, we didn't do it on our own. We did it clearly in step with Canada.
Canada, well, that's a new one. Joining me is Australia's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper. Greg, can you explain what is going on? 4 things in 1 week, all shot down. What are they?
Well, Andrew, it's a very mysterious circumstance. So the balloon was certainly electronic surveillance equipment by China, very naked. You wonder if the Chinese system is functioning properly because they knew that Antony Blinken was just about to go to China. They couldn't imagine that the balloon device wouldn't be noticed. Now, the 3 other devices, America doesn't shoot things out of the sky in a wanton fashion, so we don't know what they are, but you have to say it's a very good bet that they were also electronic surveillance gear, probably from the Chinese. By the way, one little footnote, every alien spacecraft that has ever been seen in the history of the world is either a Chinese, a Russian, or an American communications intercept device, or a new American plane being test flown. I think we can, but I'm glad to see the Pentagon didn't rule out aliens in this case.
Greg, we're trying to be serious here. But why, Greg, the lack of detail from the White House and the Pentagon? That just adds to the whole mystery, saying they're just objects. I mean, seriously, they can give more detail than that, surely.
Yeah, I think this has been, at the very best, a very sloppy process from the Biden White House. Now, oddly enough, the Chinese are doing a great job for us in educating the world about what the Chinese state is all about. But it was bizarre to let that Chinese balloon device drift all across America, spending large amounts of time above top secret American military facilities with this very sophisticated electronic communications intercept device. And I mean, it wasn't storing the information on a hard drive, which was going to be sent back to Beijing by carrier pigeon. It was broadcasting all the information it got to Beijing for the whole week that it was making its leisurely way across American skies. That seems a bit strange, that the Americans allowed that to happen. Then they shot it down, and I think the Biden administration worked out that the American people like to see it shot down. But then it's hard to believe that these 3 new devices, that there have been no devices like this in the past. They've all just come up this week. Or are the Americans now newly attentive about shooting them down? And how come we can't get any coherent line out of the White House or the Pentagon? At the very best, this is extremely sloppy, but, you know, I always distrust conspiracy theories, but this all doesn't add up publicly.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's like they're suddenly out on a skeet shooting range. I mean, it's just no sooner one up and boom, you know, golly, a bit hair trigger. The British government even says that some balloons may even pass over their country too. It's ordered an inquiry. Is how very mysterious this gets. But speaking of Britain, Greg, here's another conundrum. You've been right on top of the desperate need we have to find a new generation of submarines to replace our ageing Collins-class ones. It reads almost like a farce. First, we were going to get these new submarines from Japan. Then we signed a deal with France instead. Then it seemed we were going to get them from America. And now there's reports that we've actually signed a deal with Britain instead for its Astute class subs, £2 billion a pop. Please, Greg, you've been right on top of this. Tell us what's going on.
Well, Andrew, it is worth observing that had Tony Abbott remained Prime Minister and we'd stuck with his Japanese subs, I published a leaked draft white paper that was produced under him. The first one was meant to be in service by 2028. So we'd have the first of a fleet of probably 12 up to the minute Japanese conventional subs in a couple of years. Now, a few weeks ago, the story was that we were going to get subs from the Americans because the Americans make the best nuclear subs, but they're much bigger than the British subs. The latest story is that we're going to get a British Astute class submarine, and one reason to give it a lot of credibility is that it's being reported in the British press. Well, they often get things wrong, but it looks very much like they've been briefed by the British government with Rishi Sunak to go to Washington next month, and the strong rumour is Anthony Albanese will go to Washington at the same time. There'll be an AUKUS summit with Biden, Sunak, and Albanese, and they will announce what we're going to get. And the latest rumour seems to be that we're going to get a British Astute sub with an American combat system, and maybe the Americans making the reactors for us, although they don't currently make reactors the size of an Astute sub. The British would presumably have to open a new production line because they're about to embark on building a completely different class of subs. It's going to cost us way, way, way more than £2 billion a sub, £2 billion a sub. And then there's still this fantasy that somehow or other we're going to build it in Adelaide. So I guess, we'll be able to assemble the last bits of it in Adelaide like an IKEA piece of furniture or something. It all seems to me like it's going to be many, many years away. The nuclear sub is one of the most complex artefacts the human race has ever produced. And I think a sure road to success, when you've never done it before in the history of your nation, is to make it 1,000 times more complicated. So we're not going to buy an off-the-shelf British sub. We're not going to buy an off-the-shelf American sub. We're supposed to get this British sub with American reactor and combat system. So that seems to be the latest rumour. Now, it's very sexy, but it's not going to come for a long, long time. And in the meantime, the only thing we've got between us and maritime nakedness is these 6 antique Collins subs.
Greg, I also fear that what's happened is we started off wanting the best, an American sub, and we're settling for what we can get, which is a British one, because the Americans say, look, our production lines are pretty full on right now, don't know if we can help. So really, what a farce it's been. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much indeed for your time.